When the police arrived at Grandma Evelyn's house, she greeted them with a warm smile and a plate of freshly baked cookies, as if expecting old friends rather than law enforcement officers. The kind of smile that seemed to radiate comfort, safety, and familiarity, yet hid a lifetime of secrets. No one could have guessed that behind the lace curtains, the tidy flower garden, and the soft ticking of the hallway clock, an entire history of terror had been carefully curated over decades. The front door creaked as they stepped inside, and the faint smell of tea mixed with a subtle scent of damp wood filled the air. Everything about the house whispered domestic tranquility, a facade so convincing that even the most skeptical detective could be lulled into a false sense of security. Evelyn, a petite woman with silver hair tucked neatly behind her ears and eyes that sparkled with what looked like grandmotherly warmth, motioned for the officers to sit. Her hands, adorned with delicate rings, trembled ever so slightly as she poured steaming tea into delicate china cups. She spoke softly about the weather, the roses she had grown in her garden, and the joys of knitting for the local children. Sergeant Mark Lawson, a man with 22 years of experience in homicide investigations, felt a strange unease settle over him, though he could not immediately pinpoint its source. The kitchen seemed ordinary, almost banal, but the faint echo of something sinister lingered beneath the homely chatter, like a shadow behind sunlight. It was when Evelyn mentioned the basement that Mark's instincts screamed in silent alarm. The house had been empty for months before she moved in, she claimed, and yet there had been a series of disappearances in the small town over the past year. People had dismissed the pattern, labeling it coincidental, but Mark had been following the reports closely. Something in her tone, so casual, so rehearsed, made his skin crawl. He forced a calm expression as he asked her about the basement, and she smiled again, serene, as if revealing the family pantry rather than an ominous underground chamber. "Oh, the basement," Evelyn said. "Just some old furniture and a few boxes from my attic. Nothing of interest, really. But if you'd like, I can show you." Her voice was almost sing-song, the kind of lilt that a grandmother might use to coax a child into obedience. Mark felt his stomach tighten, but he nodded. They followed her through the narrow hallway, the floorboards groaning beneath their weight, until they reached the heavy wooden door leading down to the basement. She paused at the top of the stairs and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if encouraging him to proceed. The air in the basement was different from the warmth above. It was cold, damp, and carried the faint metallic tang that made Mark's throat dry instantly. Shelves lined the walls, filled with what appeared to be innocuous household items. Tools, jars of preserves, and neatly stacked books. But as their eyes adjusted to the dim light, the true horror became apparent. On one shelf, carefully displayed, were personal belongings of missing townspeople. Shoes, scarves, hats, and photographs. Each item meticulously labeled with names and dates. Mark froze, his eyes locking on a small silver pendant that hung from a hook. His breath caught in his chest. It was the pendant of his daughter, Emily, who had vanished almost a year ago. He had carried hope for 12 long months, believing she had run away or was being held somewhere, always imagining a day when he would be reunited with her. But now, here it was, displayed as part of a collection. His hands shook, and the cup of tea he had been holding trembled dangerously, spilling onto the floor. The other officers looked around in confusion, unaware of the depth of Mark's personal connection to the items. Evelyn stepped closer, her calm demeanor unshaken. She spoke softly, almost like a lullaby, describing how she had collected these objects over the years. "I like to remember people," she said. "They have such stories, such lives. I keep them safe. You understand, do not you? Memories are fragile, so I preserve them." There was no hint of remorse, only a serene matter-of-factness that made the room feel heavier with each word. Mark felt his hands clench into fists, the desire to scream, to demand answers, to act violently, warring with the paralysis of shock. Evelyn continued her quiet exposition, explaining how each item was chosen, how she had selected the people with care, and how she had ensured that no one suspected a thing. Her voice remained soft, almost comforting, even as she described actions that would send any sane person into horror. Time seemed to stretch as Mark walked among the shelves, each step revealing more reminders of lives cut short. Dolls missing a leg, coats with frayed sleeves, letters never sent. Every detail, meticulously organized, spoke of a mind obsessed with control and preservation. He could not speak, could not even fully comprehend the magnitude of what he was seeing. It was a museum of terror, curated by someone he had trusted to be harmless, someone who had smiled at him, poured tea for him, and called him dear. Finally, Evelyn motioned toward the far corner of the basement. A low wooden chest sat there, locked but with the key resting casually on top. "This," she said softly, "is my favorite, the one I think about most often." She gave him a knowing look, the kind that made his stomach twist. Without asking permission, she lifted the lid. Inside was a small coffin, perfectly preserved, lined with silk. The coffin was just large enough for a child. Mark's knees buckled as he realized what he was seeing. Emily, his daughter, perfectly preserved, her face serene as if asleep, untouched by decay. Evelyn's eyes held his for a moment, calm and almost tender. "You see," she whispered, "I keep them safe, forever. No one can hurt them here. Do not you see? It's mercy." Mark's mind reeled. The mixture of love and horror in her words was unbearable. Every instinct screamed to pull her away, to destroy the evidence, to protect his daughter, but something in Evelyn's presence held him, a terrifying gravity that made resistance almost impossible. Outside, the warm sunlight filtered through the garden. Birds chirped, and the world carried on, oblivious to the horrors hidden in the basement of this quaint little house. Inside, Mark faced a choice that would haunt him for the rest of his life. How to confront a woman who had blurred the line between devotion and monstrosity so completely that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Evelyn closed the chest gently, her hands resting on the lid as if tucking in a sleeping child. She smiled again, warm and maternal, and poured another cup of tea. "Sit, dear," she said. "Let's have some tea." Mark sank into a chair, numb, heart hammering, knowing that everything he thought he understood about good and evil had just been shattered. Mark sat frozen in the kitchen, the china cup trembling in his hands. The smell of tea and cookies, once comforting, now seemed unbearably sweet, almost cloying, mixing grotesquely with the metallic scent that lingered in his memory from the basement. Evelyn's eyes never left him, calm and unwavering, almost as if she could peer into his very soul. He could hear the faint tick of the clock above, marking time in a rhythm that now felt cruelly indifferent to the chaos in his heart. "Would you like some cookies?" Evelyn asked again, her voice gentle, almost coaxing. "I made them special today." She smiled, and something about the warmth in her eyes made Mark's stomach twist. This was no ordinary woman. This was someone who could smile as she curated a collection of lives, who could serve tea to the very people who had discovered her secret, and still appear as sweet as any grandmother in a children's book. Mark tried to speak, to demand answers, but the words seemed lodged in his throat. His mind raced. How had this gone unnoticed for so long? How had a woman, whom everyone in town had known as kind, patient, and nurturing, built an empire of horrors beneath her home? And why? Why Emily? Why had she chosen his daughter to be part of this grotesque gallery? Evelyn noticed his struggle and walked slowly to the window, looking out over her rose garden. You think me evil, she said softly, almost conversationally. But I only do what I must. I preserve what others destroy. People forget, people betray, people are careless with memories. I am careful. Her hands rested lightly on the sill, fingers tracing the patterns in the wood, yet Mark could see a strange rigidity in her posture, the cold precision of a mind obsessed with control. He tried to steady his breathing. Every instinct screamed at him to act, to take his daughter and flee, to arrest this woman immediately, but he knew the basement was the only proof. If he moved rashly, he might destroy it, or worse, trigger something he could not yet imagine. I do not understand, he said finally, voice hoarse. Why Emily? Why her? You've taken so many people, but why my daughter? Evelyn turned slowly, her gaze fixed on him, and for a brief moment he thought he saw a flicker of something almost human, almost remorseful, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Because she was special, Evelyn said simply. She is precious. I could feel it the first time I saw her. She deserves to be safe. Do not you want her to be safe too? Mark's blood ran cold. She spoke as if preserving a life in a locked box of silk and shadow was an act of kindness. But it was not. It was possession. It was control. It was murder disguised as love. The other officers shifted uneasily in the room, sensing the tension but not fully comprehending its depth. Detective Harlan, a younger officer, tried to take charge, moving toward the basement door, flashlight in hand. We need to secure evidence, he said firmly, though his voice carried a quiver that betrayed his fear. Evelyn shook her head, smiling serenely. There's no need for that, she said. Everything you need to know is here. She gestured to the shelves lining the walls, each item meticulously labeled. You see, I do not hide anything. I preserve it. Mark's eyes darted around the basement in panic. Each shelf, each label, each carefully chosen object was a reminder of how thoroughly Evelyn had planned everything. Years of meticulous observation, patient calculation, and cold precision had culminated here, in this room, with his daughter lying peacefully in a silk-lined coffin at its center. What do you mean, you preserve it? He asked, a voice rising. This is sick. It is love, she interrupted gently. You think love is soft and forgiving, but real love is eternal. I keep them safe from the world, from danger, from decay, from betrayal. You yourself cannot protect them. I can. Mark's hands clenched around the cup, china creaking under the pressure. He could feel tears of fury, despair, and helplessness rising, but he swallowed them down. He needed a plan. He needed to act. And yet, Evelyn's calm, hypnotic presence made every rational thought falter. Hours seemed to pass as Evelyn continued to speak, recounting her philosophy, the reasoning behind her choices, and even the patterns she had followed for decades. She spoke of families she had observed, children she had saved, neighbors she had chosen or ignored. Each word dripped with a chilling combination of tenderness and cruelty. Mark realized, with dawning horror, that she did not see herself as a murderer. She saw herself as a guardian, a preserver, a curator of life. But the evidence was undeniable. Emily's disappearance, the collection of possessions, the coffin in the corner, all screamed otherwise. The cognitive dissonance twisted inside him like a knife. Detective Harlan finally spoke again, louder this time. Sergeant Lawson, we need to arrest her. Now. Mark turned slowly to him, his eyes wild. Do you have any idea what she is capable of? You think we can just drag her out? She controls everything in this house. She controls the basement, the locks, the doors, and she controls her mind. Nothing here is normal. Evelyn, sensing the rising tension, set her teacup down with deliberate care. "You can try," she said softly, "but you will not succeed. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever." Her gaze swept over the room, landing on Mark's chest. "You already know too much. You are part of the story now." The words sent a shiver down his spine. He felt the room tilt, the walls narrowing, the shadows lengthening as if the house itself were alive, watching, waiting. He realized with mounting terror that Evelyn had thought of everything, planned everything, anticipated every move. They were not visitors in her home. They were intruders in a world she had built for herself, and she alone was the architect. Then, without warning, the lights flickered, and the basement plunged into darkness. A low hum began, barely audible at first, like the vibration of a faraway machine. It grew louder, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to echo through the walls, through the floor, through Mark's chest. He tried to call out, but his voice was swallowed by the oppressive stillness. Evelyn's calm voice cut through the darkness. "Do not fear, dear. You are safe. But the world outside cannot enter here. You belong to me now, just as they do." Panic surged. Mark lunged for the staircase, groping blindly, but the stairs seemed to stretch endlessly downward. Or perhaps they were the same staircase he had descended hours ago. He could not tell. The air grew colder, the metallic scent stronger. And then, through the darkness, he saw movement. Shadows shifting, figures emerging from the corners of the basement. Dolls? Children? Adults? He could not discern, but each step toward him was deliberate, silent, patient. A whisper brushed past his ear. "Forever." Mark stumbled, heart hammering, reaching for a door, a wall, anything solid. But the basement seemed infinite, stretching in every direction. He realized, with a bone-deep terror, that Evelyn's basement was more than a room. It was a labyrinth, a world unto itself, a trap. And the collection, the coffins, the belongings, they were only the beginning. Evelyn's voice floated through the darkness again, calm and motherly. "You see, Sergeant, you cannot take her. You cannot leave. You are part of the story now, and stories are eternal." Mark's mind screamed. His hands clawed at the floor, at the walls, at shadows that seemed to shift like living things. And then, faintly at first, he heard it, a soft breathing, a lullaby sung in a child's voice. It was Emily, his daughter. But the sound was wrong, warped, distant yet everywhere. The room, or whatever this place had become, resonated with it. And then, with a sudden, deafening clarity, the truth struck him like a physical blow. The basement had never been merely a room. It had been a trap, a prison of time and space, designed not just to preserve, but to contain. Those who entered never left unchanged. They became part of Evelyn's collection, minds bending to her vision of safety, bodies lingering in the labyrinth until they, too, were catalogued, labeled, remembered. Mark fell to his knees, eyes wide, trembling, knowing that he was already too late. He had stepped into a world ruled by a mind far beyond comprehension, where love and death were indistinguishably intertwined. And through it all, Evelyn's voice sang softly, "Forever, my dear, forever we are safe." The darkness pressed closer, the whispers grew louder, and somewhere, deep within the labyrinth, a small silver pendant swung gently from a hook, catching a faint glimmer of light. It was Emily's. Mark screamed, but the sound was swallowed, absorbed into the ever-expanding shadows. And the last thing he saw before the darkness claimed him completely was Evelyn's serene, maternal smile, unchanged by decades, by horror, by the inevitability of eternity. The darkness in the basement seemed to have a life of its own. Mark struggled to stand, hands pressed against the cold, damp walls. But the space around him shifted imperceptibly with every movement, as though the room itself were bending to Evelyn's will. He could hear the faint scuff of footsteps behind him, soft yet deliberate, and then whispers, thousands of them, seeping from the corners, the shelves, the air itself. Each whispered name, each tiny cry, each laugh long forgotten, merged into a horrifying symphony that rattled his mind. "Mark," Evelyn's voice cooed, tender and terrifying all at once. "You are part of it now. You can resist, but you cannot leave. It is already too late." He turned wildly, trying to locate her, but she was nowhere visible. The shadows shifted and danced, stretching across the floor and up the walls, twisting the very geometry of the basement. The shelves of belongings, which had seemed so concrete moments ago, now appeared to stretch into infinity, a labyrinth of memories, each object radiating the life and death it had collected. Mark's heart hammered as he realized the terrifying truth. Evelyn's basement was not just a storage for keepsakes. It was a world of its own, suspended somewhere between time and reality. Those who entered were caught in it, their minds bending to the rhythm of her obsession. He could feel it pressing at the edges of his consciousness, the pull of resignation, the seduction of acceptance. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet he could not find the exit. From the darkness, a soft chime echoed, metal against metal. His gaze fell on a small, silver pendant dangling in the half-light. His daughter, Emily. He rushed toward it, trembling, but as his fingers brushed the chain, the pendant slipped from his grasp, vanishing into the shadows with a soft laugh that sounded both like Emily and someone else entirely. "Do you want her?" Evelyn whispered from behind, her voice wrapping around him like a silk ribbon tightening into a noose. "Then you must understand. You cannot take her. She belongs here, as they all do. Safe, remembered, preserved." Mark's knees buckled. His vision swam as the whispers became louder, more insistent. Names he recognized, names he had never known, all calling, all pleading, all laughing. He tried to scream, tried to fight, but his voice cracked and dissolved into the endless dark. And then, as the panic reached its peak, something even more horrifying happened. The faces of the missing appeared around him, pressed into the shadows, smiling serenely, eyes empty yet knowing. Emily's face was among them, a pale, perfect mask, and she reached toward him. Not as a child, not as his daughter, but as a ghostly extension of Evelyn's will, frozen in a moment that would never pass. "Forever," Evelyn's voice rang out clearly, slicing through the chaotic chorus of whispers. "You are safe. You are preserved. You are remembered." Mark's mind fractured under the weight of comprehension. Every attempt at resistance, every thought of escape, crumbled under the certainty that he, too, was now a piece of Evelyn's collection. He fell to the cold, damp floor, unable to move, unable to speak, staring into the infinite darkness as it consumed him. And then, as he lay paralyzed, the basement seemed to shift again. The shelves became corridors, the objects became doors, and the whispers coalesced into a single, haunting voice. Emily, calling his name, urging him forward. Every step he tried to take was met with resistance, the basement folding in on itself, guiding him, trapping him, reshaping him. He realized with a bone-deep terror that this place was eternal, a prison not built of walls or locks, but of mind and memory. Evelyn appeared suddenly, standing on the edge of a shadowed archway that had not been there moments before. She extended a hand to him, smiling. "Come," she said softly, "you do not need to fear. This is where they all live now. Safe, remembered, loved." Mark's shaking hand reached toward hers. a mixture of hope and despair tearing at his consciousness. But as soon as he made contact, a cold wave passed through him, and the world twisted violently. He was no longer in control. His body moved of its own accord, stepping into the endless corridors of shelves, each lined with objects, each radiating the lives of those taken before him. He heard Emily's voice again, sweet and mournful, echoing endlessly. Time lost all meaning. Days, years, centuries, he could not distinguish them. Every attempt to remember the world outside, to cling to reality, was swallowed by Evelyn's presence. She was everywhere, her will permeating every object, every shadow, every breath. And yet, paradoxically, there was calm, a strange, suffocating serenity in knowing that escape was impossible, that resistance was meaningless, that he, too, would be preserved. Mark stumbled forward, guided by an unseen force. Around him, other figures, doll-like, spectral, some human, some not, moved silently along the labyrinthine shelves. Some smiled, some wept silently, but all were caught, all were part of Evelyn's eternal narrative. He realized that this was no ordinary murder. It was a transformation, a reclamation of life itself, twisted through obsession and mania. The pendant dangled again before him, glinting faintly. Emily's face appeared, serene, staring into his eyes. He wanted to call to her, to hold her, to free her, but she was already gone, consumed by Evelyn's vision. And as he reached for her once more, the shadows closed around him, whispering, "Forever." Evelyn's voice, soft and maternal, wrapped around the darkness, resonating in his mind. "You are part of the story now. You belong to me. You are safe. You are remembered. You are loved." The last shred of resistance left him. Mark's vision blurred as he felt himself dissolve into the labyrinth, his memories folding into the shelves, his identity merging with the collection. The pendant rested against his chest, Emily's smile frozen in silk and shadow. Evelyn watched, serene, as another soul became eternal in her world. Outside, the sun set over the rose garden. Birds sang, the wind rustled through the leaves, and the quaint little house remained exactly as it had always been, warm, inviting, and utterly ordinary. No one would suspect the horrors hidden within. No one would guess the labyrinth beneath the floors, the infinite collection of lives, preserved perfectly, eternally. Evelyn poured herself another cup of tea, smiled, and waited. And somewhere in the basement, in a world beyond time, Mark felt the last vestige of himself slip away, replaced by the impossible calm of eternal captivity, as Emily's voice whispered softly beside him, "Forever." The house remained, silent, innocent, ordinary. And yet, behind every door, beneath every floorboard, the collection grew. Safe, remembered, loved.